Look at these two bean plants. This one is lush, dark green, absolutely loaded with pods, climbing like it means it. And this one right next to it, same soil, same sun, same water. Yellowing leaves, spindly stems, maybe two sad little beans trying to hang on. What is the difference? I killed the second one on purpose. Not because I enjoy plant murder, but because I had to see it with my own eyes to believe it. There is one mistake, one single thing you are almost certainly doing right now with your beans. That is a guaranteed death sentence. It is not a pest, it is not a disease, and it is not your soil quality. It is a piece of advice you have probably read in a dozen gardening books and seen in 100 YouTube videos. And it could not be more wrong. The reason this mistake is so widespread is honestly kind of annoying. It is a classic case of advice that sounds so logical, so intuitive, that nobody ever questions it. It gets printed in one book, then copied to the next, then repeated online until it becomes gardening gospel. And the companies that sell you replacement seeds and fertilizer and soil amendments, they have absolutely no reason to correct the record. Why would they? A dead plant means a repeat customer. A thriving plant that produces more beans than you can eat, that saves its own seed for next year, that builds your soil instead of depleting it, that is a threat to their entire business model. So they stay quiet, and gardeners keep scratching their heads every summer, wondering why their beans look great for 3 weeks and then just give up. I have been growing food for a good 15 years now, and I have made this mistake more times than I care to admit. I have stared at yellow leaves, I have cursed at empty trellises, I have blamed the weather, the bugs, the seed company, everything except the one thing that was actually killing my plants. And I know exactly what you might be thinking right now. Probably just another clickbait gardening secret that turns out to be some expensive product you have to order from a specialty supplier. I completely understand your skepticism. I thought exactly the same thing until I finally connected the dots, and honestly, the answer made me feel like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. It was right there, hidden in plain sight, something my grandfather did without ever explaining why. Do you know that feeling, standing in front of your bean trellis in late July, looking at leaves that have turned a sickly pale green, edges curling, bottom leaves already dropping off, and you just feel this wave of disappointment? You did everything right. You started them at the right time, you gave them good compost, you watered them consistently, you even talked to them like a crazy person. And still they are failing. I know that feeling all too well. For years, I just assumed beans were difficult. I figured some people had the magic touch, and I did not. I started more seeds, I tried different varieties, I bought expensive organic fertilizers, I adjusted my watering schedule down to the minute. Nothing worked consistently. Some years were okay, most were a bust. And the thing that gets me every time, the thing that still makes me shake my head, is that the solution is not a product. It is not a secret technique. It is simply knowing what not to do. That is the whole idea. Let me walk you through the usual suspects first, because I know your mind is already racing through the checklist of things that could go wrong with beans. You are thinking about pests, maybe. Bean beetles, aphids, spider mites. And sure, those can be a problem. But I am talking about a plant that fails even when there is not a single bug on it. You might be thinking about disease, some fungal issue in the soil, maybe root rot from overwatering. Valid concern, but I have seen this happen in perfectly drained, sandy soil that dries out almost too fast. What about nutrition? Beans are heavy feeders, right? Actually, no. That is the first clue. That is the crack in the conventional wisdom that starts to let the light in. Beans are not heavy feeders. Not in the way you think. And if you have been feeding them like they are tomatoes or corn, you have been signing their death warrant with a bag of fertilizer. Let me address the most common piece of advice I hear, The one that is killing plants by the millions every summer. You have probably been told that beans love nitrogen. You have probably read that they need rich, heavily amended soil. You have probably dutifully mixed in manure or blood meal or some high-nitrogen organic fertilizer before planting, feeling very responsible and prepared. And then you watch your bean plants explode with growth, huge dark green leaves, thick stems climbing like crazy, and you think, yes, I nailed it this year. And then the flowers come. And then the flowers drop. Every single one. No beans. Just a massive, gorgeous, utterly useless green bush that is essentially flexing on you. That is nitrogen toxicity. You loved your beans to death with kindness. You gave them so much food that they never felt any urgency to reproduce. They had it too good. Why bother making seeds when the soil is already a five-star buffet? The plant's only job, biologically speaking, is to make more of itself. If it thinks it is living in a resource paradise, it just keeps growing leaves. It only shifts into reproductive mode, flowers and pods, when it senses a little stress, a little scarcity, a reason to panic and ensure the next generation. By overfeeding, you remove that signal entirely. Now the other side of this coin, and this is the mistake that kills the plant outright, not just the harvest, is the exact opposite problem but triggered by the same misunderstanding. Some gardeners, having heard that beans are legumes and legumes fix their own nitrogen, decide to plant them in the worst, most depleted soil on their property. The logic seems sound. Beans make their own food, right? They do not need anything. Throw them in that dusty corner where nothing else grows. And this is where the death spiral begins, and it breaks my heart because I have done it myself, thinking I was being clever and resourceful. Here is what actually happens. A bean seed, like any seed, has a tiny reserve of energy to push out a root and a shoot. Once those are out, the plant needs to photosynthesize, and it needs nutrients from the soil immediately. The nitrogen-fixing bacteria, the rhizobia that colonize the roots and pull nitrogen from the air, they are not just sitting there waiting to start work on day one. The plant has to grow roots first, then the bacteria have to find those roots, then they have to form nodules, and then, only then, does the nitrogen fixing begin. This process can take weeks. In the meantime, that little bean seedling is starving. It is sitting in barren dirt, trying to build a body with nothing, and it just stalls. It turns pale, then yellow, then it stops growing entirely. It never gets big enough to form a meaningful relationship with the bacteria. It dies before its own survival mechanism even kicks in. It is like sending a newborn baby out to get a job to pay for its own formula. It does not work. So you have two guaranteed paths to failure. Feed them like pigs and they refuse to fruit. Starve them and they die before they can start. The sweet spot is so much narrower than anyone tells you, and it is almost never described correctly in generic gardening advice. The phrase that gets repeated is beans are light feeders, or beans don't need much nitrogen. Both are technically true but practically useless unless you understand the timing, the microbial partnership, and the one substance you should never, ever put near your beans. I am going to tell you exactly what it is, and I guarantee you have some of it in your garden shed right now. The secret, the thing my grandfather did without ever explaining it, was revealed to me not by him directly, but by watching him over years and finally asking the right question. He grew the most incredible pole beans I have ever seen. Rattlesnake beans, Kentucky wonders, long purple ones I still cannot identify. His trellises were absolutely loaded every August. And I noticed something odd. He never bought fertilizer. Not once. He had a compost pile, sure, but he never put compost on his bean beds. He would put it on the tomatoes, the squash, the peppers, and then just skip the bean row entirely. One day I asked him why. He just shrugged and said, "They don't like it." That was it. No explanation, no science. Just 40 years of observation, boiled down to 3 words. They don't like it. It took me another decade of reading soil microbiology and killing my own plants to finally understand what he meant. He was not saying beans do not like compost in general. He was saying beans do not like what compost becomes when it is not fully finished, or what fresh manure introduces, or what most bagged organic fertilizers are absolutely loaded with. A single element, nitrogen in its readily available form. But here is the twist, and this is where the real learning happens. It is not just about avoiding nitrogen. That is only half the story. The real mistake, the one my title promises will kill your plants every time, is a specific action you take in the first 2 weeks after planting. It is not fertilizing. It is not watering. It is touching the roots. If you start your beans in pots, in those little peat pods or plastic cells, and then you transplant them into the garden like you do with your tomatoes and peppers, you have already killed them. They just do not know it yet. Beans hate, absolutely despise, having their roots disturbed. They are not like tomatoes, which will root from a buried stem and bounce back from transplant shock in a few days. A bean's root system is delicate, fibrous, and intimately connected with a microscopic fungal network that begins forming almost immediately after germination. When you pop that seedling out of its pot, you tear those connections apart. The plant goes into shock. It stalls. It sits there, not growing, not dying, just frozen for a week, sometimes 2. And while it is frozen, it is vulnerable. Soil pathogens that a healthy, growing plant could outpace now have a stationary target. Pests find a weakened plant and go to town. The window for the nitrogen-fixing bacteria to establish closes. The plant never recovers. It might limp along for a month, maybe even throw a few half-hearted beans, but it will never be what it could have been. It is already dead. It just takes a while to finish the process. Hand on heart, how many of you have started beans indoors, thinking you were getting a jump on the season, and then watched them sit there doing nothing for 3 weeks while your neighbor's direct-sown beans shot up and overtook them? I have been that person. I have absolutely been that person, staring at my sad little transplants, willing them to grow, while the seeds I poked directly into the ground a week later were already climbing past them. It is humbling. It is also completely avoidable. Beans are a direct sow crop. That is not a suggestion. It is a rule. You put the seed in the ground where you want the plant to live its entire life, and you never move it. Ever. Now let us talk about that ground. What should it be? I told you not to plant in barren dirt and not to plant in a nitrogen bomb. So what is the Goldilocks zone? The answer is moderate fertility with excellent drainage and a neutral to slightly acidic pH, which is just a fancy way of saying normal garden soil that has not been recently blasted with fresh manure. If you have been gardening in the same spot for a few years and you have been adding compost regularly, your soil is probably already perfect for beans. You do not need to add anything at planting time. Not a single handful of anything. If your soil is truly terrible, heavy clay or pure sand, then you add one thing and one thing only. Well-aged compost. Not fresh manure. Not hot chicken litter. Not blood meal. Compost that is so broken down it looks and smells like dark, crumbly forest floor. Mix that into the top 6 inches. And then stop. Walk away. Do not add anything else. The other critical factor, and this is one that gets overlooked constantly, is warmth. Beans are not cool weather crops. They are not peas. You cannot plant them in April just because the soil is workable and expect them to thrive. Bean seeds sitting in cold, wet soil will rot. They will not germinate. Or if they do, they will emerge weak and stunted. The soil temperature, measured with a simple probe thermometer that costs maybe $10, needs to be at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit, not 60 degrees air temperature, 60 degrees soil temperature. For most of us, that means waiting until at least 2 weeks after your last frost date, often later. I've had better results planting beans in the first week of June than in the middle of May, simply because the soil was warmer. The seeds come up faster, the plants grow with vigor, and they never experience that early cold stress that can permanently stunt them. Patience here is not a virtue. It is a survival strategy. Let me give you the exact method, the step-by-step that has given me, for the last 5 years running, more beans than I know what to do with. I am going to walk you through it like you are standing next to me in the garden, and I am going to tell you what not to do at every single stage, because the don'ts matter more than the do's. First, pick your spot. Full sun, at least 6 hours of direct sun, 8 is better. Beans can tolerate a little afternoon shade in really hot climates, but do not push it. More sun means more photosynthesis, more sugar, more pods. Prepare the bed by loosening the soil to about 8 inches deep. If you have heavy clay, this is where you add that well-aged compost. A 2-inch layer worked into the top 6 inches is plenty. If your soil is already decent, do nothing. Rake it smooth. Now, and this is important, do not pre-soak your bean seeds. I know you have read that tip. Soaking beans overnight supposedly speeds up germination. And yes, technically it does by a few hours. But it also massively increases the risk of the seed rotting in the ground, especially if the soil is a little too wet or a little too cold. A dry seed knows how to manage its own water uptake. It has been doing it for millions of years. Trust it. Plant the seed dry, pointy end down, about 1 inch deep. Do not push it 2 inches deep. Do not barely cover it. 1 inch. Use your finger, poke a hole, drop the seed in, cover it, and press the soil down gently. Do not compact it like you are tamping a gravel path. Just firm enough to ensure good seed-to-soil contact. Spacing. This is where I see the most chaos in people's gardens. Pole beans, the climbing types, need about 4 inches between plants in a row, with rows spaced about 18 to 24 inches apart if you are doing multiple rows. Bush beans, the compact ones, need about 6 inches between plants. Do not crowd them. I know the seed packet shows a dense little forest of beans, and it looks so productive, but crowded beans are stressed beans. They compete for light, for water, for the nutrients that are there, and stressed beans are a magnet for every pest and disease in the neighborhood. Give them room to breathe. Airflow is your best defense against fungal problems like powdery mildew and rust, which are the 2 most common bean diseases I see. Good airflow means leaves dry quickly after rain or morning dew. Wet leaves are an invitation to fungal spores. Space your plants so that by midsummer, you can still see a little daylight through the canopy. Watering. This is the part where I am going to sound like a broken record, but it is so crucial. Beans need consistent moisture, especially during flowering and pod set. Inconsistent watering, letting the soil dry out completely and then flooding it, is a direct cause of blossom drop and misshapen pods. The goal is to keep the soil evenly moist, like a wrung-out sponge, not a swamp and not a desert. Water at the base of the plant, not overhead. Wet leaves again mean fungal issues. A soaker hose or drip irrigation is ideal. If you are watering by hand, take the time to water the soil, not the plant. And mulch. For the love of all things green, mulch your beans. A 2 to 3 inch layer of straw, shredded leaves, or grass clippings, applied after the soil has warmed up and the seedlings are a few inches tall. Mulch keeps the soil moisture even, suppresses weeds, and keeps the soil cool. Beans have relatively shallow roots. Mulch protects that root zone from the baking sun. It is the cheapest, simplest thing you can do to dramatically improve your bean harvest, and almost nobody does it consistently. Now the moment of truth. The thing you must never, ever add to your bean bed. The substance that, if you have already applied it, I want you to go out there tomorrow and scrape it off if you can. It is not vinegar, it is not salt, and it is certainly not any harsh chemical weed killer. It is something far more innocent looking, far more commonly recommended, and far more deadly to your bean plants than almost anything else. It is fresh manure, or more precisely, any fertilizer with a high first number on the NPK label. That first number is nitrogen, and if that number is above about 5, you are playing with fire. A typical bag of chicken manure pellets might read 432. That seems low, right? It is not. In the concentrated, readily available form of a processed fertilizer, that nitrogen hits the root zone fast, dissolves in soil water, and the plant takes it up whether it wants to or not. It cannot refuse. And when it takes up too much nitrogen, several things happen. The cell walls in the plant become thin and weak because the plant is growing too fast. Those weak cell walls are like an open door for aphids and fungal spores. The plant also produces an excess of certain amino acids that are exactly what sap-sucking insects are looking for. You are literally ringing the dinner bell. And as we already covered, the plant stays in vegetative mode, producing leaf after leaf, and never bothers to flower. You get a huge, lush, bug-infested, barren plant. But fresh manure is even worse. Fresh manure, especially from chickens or horses, is not just high in nitrogen. It is hot. It is biologically active in a way that can actually burn plant roots on contact. And it is often loaded with salts that draw moisture out of the roots through osmosis. It is like curing a headache by cutting off your head. Technically, you added fertility. Practically, you created a toxic waste site for a baby bean plant. If you have access to manure, great. Compost it for a full year, let it break down, let the rain leach out the excess salts, let the nitrogen stabilize into organic forms that release slowly. Then and only then can you use it on your beans, and even then use it sparingly. A 1-inch layer of well-rotted horse manure compost, dug in a month before planting, is the absolute maximum I would ever consider. And honestly, I do not even do that anymore. My beans get nothing but what is already in the soil, and they produce like crazy. The other thing you never add, and this one breaks my heart because it is sold as a natural, organic wonder product, is blood meal. Blood meal is essentially pure nitrogen, like 1200. It is rocket fuel. If you put blood meal on your beans, you might as well just mow them down and start over. I have a picture in my mind, and I wish I had taken a real photo, of a row of beans I planted about 10 years ago. I had read somewhere that blood meal was a great slow-release nitrogen source for all vegetables. I sprinkled a little in the planting hole for everything. The tomatoes loved it. The corn shot up. The beans came up, grew about 6 inches, turned the darkest green I have ever seen, and then just stopped. They sat there stunted for 2 months. They never flowered. They never climbed. They were like little green statues, a monument to my own ignorance. I eventually pulled them out, and the roots were pathetic, barely a few strands, no nodules at all. The rhizobia bacteria never even bothered to show up. Why would they? The soil was already saturated with nitrogen. The plant never sent out the chemical signals to attract them because it did not need them. I had short-circuited the most elegant, ancient partnership in the plant kingdom with a handful of brown powder. Let us talk about that partnership for a moment, because understanding it is the key to never making this mistake again. Legumes, the family that includes beans and peas, have a unique ability. They form a symbiotic relationship with a specific type of soil bacteria called rhizobia. The plant sends out chemical signals from its roots that attract the bacteria. The bacteria enter the root hairs, and the plant forms a nodule around them, a little lump on the root. Inside that nodule, the bacteria do something astonishing. They take nitrogen gas from the air spaces in the soil and convert it into ammonia, a form of nitrogen the plant can use. In exchange, the plant feeds the bacteria sugars it made through photosynthesis. It is a perfect trade. The plant gets nitrogen, the bacteria gets food. This system is so efficient that a healthy stand of beans can actually add nitrogen to the soil for the next crop. This is why beans are a classic cover crop. But the system only works if the plant needs nitrogen. If the soil is already rich in available nitrogen, the plant will not invest the energy in building nodules. It will just take the easy way out, absorbing the free nitrogen from the soil, and the bacteria never get invited to the party. You have turned off the plant's superpower. You have taken a self-sufficient nitrogen-fixing machine and turned it into a needy, dependent fertilizer junkie that will crash the moment that artificial nitrogen runs out. The science here is not complicated. It is basic plant biology, but it is almost never explained in the simple terms that a home gardener needs. We get these oversimplified rules. Beans don't need fertilizer, and we either follow them blindly or we overthink them and add fertilizer anyway because we do not trust that nature knows what it is doing. Nature does know. Your job is just to not get in the way. Let me tell you about a real example that made this all click for me. A few years back, I visited a friend who had a small market garden. He grew the most beautiful vegetables I had ever seen, and his beans were legendary at the farmer's market. I asked him what his secret was. He walked me over to his bean field, which was planted on a gentle slope, and he pointed to the soil. It was sandy loam, nothing special, no dark, rich muck. He said he had not added a single thing to that field in 7 years. No compost, no manure, no fertilizer. He just planted beans, harvested them, and then in the fall he mowed the spent plants down and tilled them in. That was it. The beans fed themselves, and they fed the soil. He was not extracting nutrients. He was cycling them. The nitrogen fixed by the beans stayed in the plant residue and became available for the next crop as it decomposed. He had built a closed-loop system that required zero inputs, zero cost, and his yields were staggering. That conversation rewired my brain. I went home, I stopped fertilizing my beans entirely, and I have never looked back. Now, there is one exception, one tiny nuance I want to give you so you do not go away thinking I said beans need absolutely nothing ever. If you are growing beans in a container, in a pot on a patio, the rules are slightly different. A container is a closed system. There are no native rhizobia bacteria in a bag of potting mix. You need to introduce them. You can buy a powdered bean inoculant, which is just a concentrated form of the specific rhizobia bacteria for beans. You dust the seeds with it before planting. It costs a few dollars, and one bag will last you years. That is the only input I recommend for container beans. Do not add fertilizer. Just the inoculant, good potting mix, and consistent water. The bacteria will do the rest. If you cannot find inoculant, do not panic. Your beans will still grow. They just might not reach their full nitrogen-fixing potential. They will scavenge what they need from the potting mix. But do not try to compensate by adding fertilizer. That is the mistake. That is always the mistake. Let me walk you through a specific scenario I see all the time. You planted your beans directly in the ground. You did not add any fertilizer, and they are still yellow. They are struggling. They look hungry. What do? Your instinct is to feed them. Do not stop. Yellowing in young bean plants is almost never a nitrogen deficiency if you plant it in decent soil. It is almost always a watering problem or a temperature problem. Too much water, the roots are drowning and cannot take up nutrients. Too little water, the roots are dry and cannot take up nutrients. Too cold, the roots are sluggish and cannot take up nutrients. The nutrient is there in the soil. The plant just cannot access it because the roots are not functioning properly. Adding fertilizer to a plant with non-functioning roots is like giving a steak dinner to someone who is choking. It does not help. Fix the watering. Wait for the weather to warm up. The plant will green up on its own. I have seen it happen 100 times. A cold, wet spring makes every bean patch look a little pale and sad. By the time the solstice rolls around and the soil is warm, they are deep green and climbing. Patience. Trust the process. Another scenario. It is midsummer. Your beans are flowering, and the leaves are starting to look a little tired. A little pale, maybe some lower yellowing. Now what? Is it time to feed them? Still no. By midsummer, your beans should have well-developed nodules. They are fixing their own nitrogen. If they look tired, it is more likely a micronutrient issue or a water stress issue. Maybe they need a little potassium, which supports flowering and pod development. But here is the safe way to address that. A light top dressing of wood ash, if your soil is not already alkaline. Wood ash is mostly calcium and potassium, with zero nitrogen. A light sprinkle, and I mean light, like dusting a cake with powdered sugar, can provide that potassium boost without the nitrogen hit. Or you can use a liquid seaweed extract, which is very low in nitrogen but rich in trace minerals and growth hormones. Dilute it to half the recommended strength and water it in. That is the most I would ever do, and honestly, I only do it if the plants are clearly struggling. Most years I do nothing. The results I have gotten from this no nitrogen approach have been honestly kind of shocking, even to me, after all these years. I have a picture in my mind of last summer's harvest. I planted a 20-foot row of Kentucky Wonder pole beans. Direct sown, first week of June, into soil that had grown tomatoes the year before. The tomato bed had been well composted, but I added nothing for the beans. Just poked the seeds in, watered them, and mulched with straw. By late July, that trellis was a solid wall of green, and I was picking a 5-gallon bucket of beans every 3 days. Every 3 days. I gave beans away to neighbors, to coworkers, to the mailman. I blanched and froze bags and bags of them. I still have some in my freezer. From a single 20-foot row. No fertilizer, no compost, no manure, no blood meal, no fish emulsion, no nothing. Just soil, sun, water, and the invisible work of billions of bacteria I never saw and never paid a dime to. That is the thing that gets me every time. The solution was free. It was simpler than anything I had ever tried. And it had been right there, under my feet, the whole time. The ancient farmers who first domesticated beans in the Americas thousands of years ago, they did not have bags of 10-10-10. They did not have blood meal. They had soil and seed and generations of observation. They figured out that beans and corn and squash planted together, the three sisters, created a self-sustaining system. The beans climbed the corn and fixed nitrogen for the squash. No inputs. No Amazon orders. Just a deep understanding of how plants actually work together. We have lost so much of that knowledge in our rush to buy solutions. We have been trained to think that a problem in the garden requires a product to fix it. Yellow leaves. Buy this. No flowers. Add that. And the companies selling those products are more than happy to keep us in that loop. They are not going to tell you that your beans are dying because you are loving them to death with their own products. They are not going to tell you to stop buying things. That is not a sustainable business model for them. But it is for you. So here is what I want you to do. If you have a bean patch right now that is struggling, if the leaves are yellow and the flowers are dropping, I want you to stop. Do not add anything. Do not buy anything. Just stop. Check your watering. Is the soil consistently moist? If not, fix that. Check your mulch. Is the soil bare and baking? If so, add mulch. And then wait. Give the plant a chance to find its own balance. It might take a week or two, but if the roots are healthy and the weather is warm, it will green up. It will start to grow. It will flower. And when it does, you will feel something that no bottle of fertilizer can ever give you. You will feel like you actually understand what is happening in your garden. You will have moved from following instructions to possessing knowledge. That is real self-reliance. That is the thing I am trying to share here. Now, if you are planning your bean patch for next year, or if you are about to plant a fall crop in a warm climate, let me give you the exact, no-fail recipe. Step 1. Choose a spot in full sun. Step 2. Do not add anything to the soil unless it is pure sand or heavy clay, in which case add well-aged compost only. Step 3. Wait until the soil is warm, 60 degrees or above. Step 4. Plant dry seeds directly in the ground, 1 inch deep, 4 inches apart for pole beans, 6 for bush beans. Step 5. Water them in and keep the soil evenly moist. Step 6. Apply mulch once the seedlings are a few inches tall. Step 7. Do nothing else. No fertilizer, no compost tea, no magic potions. Step 8. Harvest beans when they are young and tender, and keep picking. The more you pick, the more the plant produces. If you let pods mature and dry on the vine, the plant thinks its job is done, and it stops flowering. Regular harvesting is the only ongoing input your beans need from you. That is it. That is the whole method. It costs nothing beyond the price of the seeds, which you can save from year to year anyway. It requires no special tools, no fancy amendments, no ongoing purchases. It is the way beans have been grown for millennia, and it works better than any modern fertilizer regimen I have ever tried. And I have tried them all. I have been the guy with the spreadsheet and the soil tests and the carefully measured organic fertilizers. I have tracked yields and compared varieties and experimented with inoculants and foliar sprays. And after all of that, the best results I have ever gotten came from doing absolutely nothing. From getting out of the way. From trusting the plant and the soil and the invisible web of life that connects them. There is a kind of quiet satisfaction in that. A feeling that you are not fighting nature, but working with it. That you are not a technician managing a chemical system, but a steward of a living process. It changes how you see the garden. It changes how you see the world, honestly. You start to notice all the other places where the conventional wisdom is just a sales pitch in disguise. All the other problems that are created by the very products sold to solve them. The weed killer that destroys the soil, so you need more fertilizer. The fertilizer that makes the plants weak, so you need more pesticide. It is a treadmill, and you can step off it. It starts with something as simple as a bean seed. So here is my challenge to you. Next time you plant beans, do it the old way. Do it the way my grandfather did, the way the indigenous farmers of the Americas did, the way any gardener who has ever truly paid attention does it. Give them good soil, sun, and water, and then leave them alone. Trust the partnership between the roots and the bacteria. Trust the millions of years of evolution that built that relationship. And when your plants are thriving, when your trellis is sagging under the weight of pods, when you are out there every evening with a basket wondering what on earth you are going to do with all these beans, remember that feeling. Remember that the best solutions are often the simplest. They are often the oldest. And they are almost always the ones nobody is trying to sell you. If this changed the way you think about growing beans, if it saved your plants or just saved you from buying another bag of fertilizer you do not need, do me a favor. Share this with another gardener. Pass on the knowledge that nearly got lost in the noise of modern gardening advice. And hit that subscribe button. We are building a community here of people who are not afraid to question the conventional wisdom, who are willing to experiment, who are rediscovering the old ways and proving that they still work. There is so much more of this forgotten knowledge to uncover, and I am going to keep sharing it as long as you keep showing up. Thanks for being here. Now go plant some beans.